So here is my guide to Amazon interview prep in 10 steps. I'm Gigi, I am an ex-senior leader at Amazon and I was also a bar raiser. So as I said, I'm going to take you through my 10 steps. Do stay until the end for all 10 because every single one of them is very necessary. I do have my trusty notes, as if you've seen any of my other videos, I always do, because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything, because it would be a problem if I missed one of these 10 steps. So let's get going. Step number 1. Now, go back into your career history. Sit down, have a good think, have a chat with ex-colleagues, and try and think about the things that you did, whether they were projects or launches or a product or anything that you delivered an output for, a problem that you solved or something along those lines, but that you're really proud of. Something that you think, yeah, I did good that day, that month, whatever it is. So go back, think about those and write them down. Write down everything that you can think of that happened from the very moment the thing started until the very moment the thing ended. So that's step 1. If you can, I guess, try and come up with 10. I'm going to go for 10. Ones you're proud of. Okay, so then step 2, park those and go off and study the Amazon leadership principles. So I'll put some really good free resources down in the description box of this video where you can go and get information about the leadership principles. But you really, I can't emphasize enough reallys, need to study and understand the leadership principles to the nth degree, because they are, as I'm sure you'll have seen in my other videos, they are the absolute DNA of what goes on in Amazon and the reference point against they will judge you at interview. So go away and study the leadership principles until you know them like the back of your hand. That's step 2. So then step 3 becomes, once you've studied and you feel that you really understand the leadership principle, pull out those examples that we talked about in step 1 and have a look at them. And as you read through them, identify which, maybe 1 or 2 if you can, of the leadership principles really resonates with each individual example. Okay? So then step 4 becomes review your job description. So I'm telling you to park that. Yeah, you've identified which leadership principle or principles best resonates with each individual example. Now park it. Go and look at your job description. In your job description, your hiring manager who would have written the job description will have detailed pretty much the key leadership principles that they really care about in the role. Now, some hiring managers will literally write them out. They need bias for action. They need to be able to dive deep. Sometimes the actual word will be in the job description. Other times it won't. It will just be language that you can infer the leadership principle from. So go to your job description and line by line by line, go through it to try and identify what the key leadership principles are. My general kind of understanding of leadership principles and job descriptions is the more times someone alludes to a leadership principle in a job description, the kind of more top of mind it is for them and therefore the more important it is. So have a go at that. If you need some support on that, go check out in my live playlist. There are 2 videos where I've actually deconstructed people's job descriptions live on air. It's terrifying. I'm always terrified I'll get it horribly wrong, but it's there. And you can watch that and that will really help you understand how you go about deconstructing job descriptions. I do offer a service for it, the link to which you'll find in the description of that video, but I'm pretty confident. Follow the video and you should be able to do it yourself. So at this point, you've deconstructed your job description and you know what appear to be the key leadership principles for the role, okay? So that was on step 4. Can't believe we're only on step 4. So we're going to move on to step 5 now. So step 5, try and then take or match between the key leadership principles that you have identified in your job description review and those stories that you found, and then you identified what the best 1 or 2 leadership principles were. So you can see where you have stories to align to the key leadership principles in your job description and where you don't, and what the gaps are. So if there are gaps, really try and challenge yourself. Is there a way of shaping one of your great stories towards that leadership principle? Even if it wasn't the leadership principle that really stood out when you looked at it the first time, ask yourself, is there a way of finessing that strong story that you really are proud of for the leadership principle that is in the job description that you don't currently have an example for? So that's the next step. Now, look at the gaps. So what leadership principles are missing? Not only missing from the ones that appear to be the key leadership principles in the job description, but also any that were actually kind of missing in the job description, but still exist within the 16 Amazon leadership principles. Now, broadly speaking, each job description will probably have 8 to 10 key leadership principles in there. That's kind of my experience of doing many job description deconstructions. Broadly, I find 8 to 10. But of course, there are another 8 to 6 on top of that. So even though you may not necessarily be asked them at interview, you do need to be prepared just in case you do. So have a look at those leadership principles that are now kind of missing from your examples and go back again into your career history mentally and see if you can think of examples that you can connect to those leadership principles. Yes, they may not be your strongest examples, but you need to have some solid examples to bring for those leadership principles just in case you're asked. Okay, so now hopefully you've got a full range of possible examples that you're going to use. The next step then, and that's step number 7 now, I hope, is draft them into that STAR structure: situation, task, action, result. And please put an I, improvement, on the end. So I actually recommend a model called STARI. So situation, task, action, result, improvement. I do have another video about that if you want to go and deep dive into that a little bit more. It's called the hidden leadership principle that no one else will tell you about. But draft them all into a STARI structure. Okay, so now step 8 of 10. We're almost there now. Step 8 of 10 is all about editing. So look at your STARI story and ask yourself, is there anything I've written in this story that doesn't add to context, i.e. it's not important for the person to know this in order to understand the story, or doesn't show a behavior? If there's anything in your story that isn't contextual or behavioral, it's not useful and you should try and edit it out because it's just a waste of words. So go through all of your stories and challenge yourself, do I need all of these words that are written in this story? If it's not contextual or behavioral, get rid of it. At that point, you should now have a STARI example that is the right length for that example. I'm asked many times about what the right length for an example is. I also have another video about that. But my general philosophy is there is no one right length. There is simply the right length for that example as long as you have gotten rid of anything that isn't contextual or behavioral. Okay, so now we're on to step 9. So you've now got your stories, your STARI stories all written down, nice and pithy and tight, no wasted words, etc. So step 9 is you actually need to develop some answers for the type of introductory questions. So you're going to get introductory questions in your Amazon interview. In the early rounds, they're going to influence the decision to move you forward more than they'll influence the decision to hire you in the final rounds. But nonetheless, you are very likely to get these questions. Why Amazon? Why this role? Tell me about yourself. Walk me through your resume. All those types of questions. So now go and come up with some answers for those questions. Again, I'm often asked what's the right length for them. You probably need to go into more depth in the early interviews than you will do in the final interviews, because in final rounds, actually, it's much more kind of introductory. So early rounds, I would say 2 minutes long. Final rounds, 1 minute, no more. Move on to the behavioral questions. Okay, and then finally, step number 10, practice, 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 and practice some more. So there is absolutely the most enormous value in doing mock interviews. Now, if you can and if you can afford it, doing a mock interview with somebody who really, really understands the Amazon process is a very good thing to do, because they will give you the nuances that people who don't understand the Amazon interview process would have no clue about. But lots of people can't do that, so that's fine. In which case, do a mock with a friend, a colleague, someone else who understands how interviewing works, so they can give you a really good simulation of what an interview is going to feel like. And they can ask you those follow-up questions so that you can practice not being thrown off your game if somebody interrupts you mid-flow, etc., etc. And then, of course, practice on your own, record yourself, watch yourself back. I'm not one that's particularly concerned about when people kind of and ah and those types of things. They really don't make much of a difference to interview. But being able to play back and hear, are you talking really fast? Because then maybe the interviewer won't understand you. Or did you forget to say something important? Because quite often you won't remember. If you're just talking out loud to yourself, you won't even notice if you've missed something important. So please record yourself and play it back to yourself. So when you've been through all of those steps and the final step where you've practiced, you should now be in very good shape for your Amazon interview. So if you enjoyed that and found that helpful, please give me a thumbs up and put a comment in the box below. Now what you need to do is click on this link here and go and grab yourself one of my free Amazon Interview Wiz Academy Customer Obsession Masterclasses. Watch that and you will nail every single customer obsession question asked of you at your Amazon interview. Or if you'd like to do that later, check out this video here for more great Amazon interview tips on interview strategy.